Hello, my name is Kevin Goodman. I'm a medical historian and author. I specialise in the epidemiological and medical history of the Black Country. Welcome to my talk on one of the unsung heroes of Black Country history, Dr. William Norris, who has very much been overlooked. But to begin, I want you to, in your minds, imagine a boy wizard. He wears glasses and has a pet white owl. Right. Do you have him in your mind? Is this the one you are envisioning? Harry Potter appeared in 1997. Actually, I wasn't referring to him. I was referring to this one. His name is Timothy Hunter, and he appeared in 1990, created by Neil Gaiman. And he had a white owl, was a wizard, and wore glasses. Now, Carl Jung would describe this as synchronicity. Both authors denied, there'd been any influence. But there's actually a scientific term for this. When two discoveries occur at the same time. Its scientific term is multiple discovery or simultaneous invention. So when independent researchers or inventors arrive at the same intellectual breakthrough without knowledge of each other's work, it's actually quite common. For example, evolution by natural selection in 1858. We usually attribute this to Charles Darwin, but the biologist Albert Russel Wallace also discovered it at the same time. But Darwin got the credit. Calculus in the 17th century, usually attributed to Isaac Newton, but was also discovered around the same time by Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. The telephone, 1876, again attributed to Alexander Graham Bell, but invented in the same year by Elisha Gray, an American. Now, Robert K. Merton does point out that simultaneous discovery is the norm in science, not the exception. And the reason this happens is the zeitgeist, or spirit of the times, when the foundational knowledge has evolved or matured to a point where the next step becomes inevitable for anyone looking, or the adjacent possible. Technological advancements make certain discoveries possible only at a specific time. For example, you cannot invent a telephone until both electricity and telegraphy exist, or shared information. Researchers in the same field often read the same literature and face the same unsolved problems. So it's natural they may come to the same conclusions. But how does this apply to Dr. William Norris? I'll come on to that later. But first, let's have a look at Dr. William Norris and his life. So Dr. William Norris was born in 1792, the eldest of four sons of William Norris, of Enville, Stourbridge, and his wife Mary. He attended Stourbridge Grammar School. I can probably imagine some cheers going up there from former pupils. He continued his education at Bartholomew's Hospital, London, where he studied under the medical luminaries, the surgeon John Abernathy. Now, he was educated at Wolverhampton Grammar School. He believed that most diseases could be linked to digestion, and this led to his invention of Abernathy biscuits to aid digestion. And also Henry Clutterbuck, a physician and surgeon. Now, he founded the journal The Medical and Chirurgical Review. This was quite a pioneering thing, and he was the author of several very well regarded medical books. So Dr. Norris had a really good grounding. He undertook further training at the London Infirmary and Edinburgh University, and received his MD from the University of St Andrews. A very educated man, and London and Edinburgh were considered centres of medical education throughout the 19th century. Upon graduating, he returned to Stourbridge and set up his practice. He became the physician for the Stourbridge dispensary. Now, the dispensaries are interesting. They were early forms of charity where poor people could go and receive free treatment from a doctor who was stationed there and a dispenser who gave out medicine. They were funded by local businesses. Frequently, if you're poor, you had to get a ticket from someone on the board of governors to go to the dispensary. It's quite fascinating. Frequently it was the vicar who was also on the board of governors. So if you went to church, it was an advantage. So that was a way you could always get a ticket. So Stourbridge dispensary was in Worcester Street. Dr. Norris also served on the Sanitary Association for Stourbridge to try and improve the sanitary conditions of Stourbridge, and acted as a surgeon for King's Winford. Now, bear in mind, a surgeon at this point was closer to a GP. So they would actually, that's where GPs evolved from. So what would happen is they could go out and visit you at your home. In June 1823, he married Anne Lascelles at Abbey Church, Malvern. They had 3 sons and 2 daughters. So I imagine that this was probably quite the society wedding, especially given that Anne was the daughter of Captain George Blake of the Royal Navy. In 1820, Dr. Norris wrote his first paper dealing with melanoma or skin cancer. He actually termed it fungoid disease. He described his treatment of a 59-year-old male whose mole had become tumorous. Norris had surgically removed this. Problem was, it had already spread and proved fatal. But Dr. Norris observed that the deceased's father had also died from a similar condition, and the man's brothers and sons also possessed such moles. He concluded, "These facts would incline me to believe that this disease is hereditary." His report is considered the first in the English language to describe familial atypical multiple mole melanoma syndrome, an inherited condition characterized by the presence of multiple moles, and this predated formal genetic understanding by over 50 years. So, a major thing. Other cases included his treatment of Thomas Smith, 19. He had suffered a hernia of the diaphragm in 1837. And also in 1846, his successful treatment of Thomas Price, a cab driver employed at the Talbot Hotel, Stourbridge, for an abscess of the liver. He was quite a prolific author, so I'm just picking out a few choice cases. Now in 1849 there were two major incidents. In some respects, these are probably his most publicly well-known incidents. So the first one was an accidental poisoning of nearly 1,000 people in the towns of Stourbridge and Kidderminster and in many neighbouring villages, of whom he treated around 120. And the second was a cholera outbreak. In the poisoning case, the servant of a miller, who also had a paper making business, accidentally mixed 30 pounds of acetate of lead, this was used for the bleaching of paper, with between 60 and 80 sacks of flour instead of alum. Now alum is an aluminium based compound which was used to make bread whiter and heavier. So really it was a nasty little trick used by bakers to con the poor. The problem was this led to malnutrition and bowel problems such as constipation or chronic diarrhea. Now the latter proved fatal for children, as you can well imagine. Now those who ate the bread complained of a peculiar taste. Their tongues had become covered with a darkish cream-coloured mucus, and their gums were swollen with a blue tinge, which extended around the inside of the mouth. There was excessive salivation, digestive problems, vomiting, violent, painful abdominal spasms, and several cases proved fatal. Dr. Norris also confessed to having unknowingly eaten some of the poisoned bread, but have only been mildly affected. So from the cartoon we can see the baker adding the alum to the bread. Now, this was very common around the Black Country and the West Midlands. However, Dr. Norris was very well acquainted with lead poisoning. He recognised the appearance of those afflicted. In this neighbourhood we have numerous glass houses, and many hundreds of men are constantly employed in the fumes of lead, and we know them by a sallow, thin, unhealthy aspect, with soft and flabby muscles. Well, Stourbridge was a centre of glass making, and I think it's often overshadowed by the coal mining that produced, really horrible results. And here we see an example of lead poisoning: soft, flabby muscles, very unhealthy appearance. So Dr. Norris was in a very good position to recognise the symptoms. Now we move on to the second occurrence. cholera. In August 1849, cholera had returned to the Black Country. Asiatic cholera. It's called Asiatic cholera because it originated in the Ganges Delta in the Bay of Bengal. It had visited the Black Country before in 1832. It had devastated the area with nearly 10,000 cases and killed nearly 2,500 men, women and children. The Black Country had been the third worst hit area in the country after London and Glasgow. Anybody who wishes to pursue the study of the impact of the cholera in the 1832 outbreak, please refer to my book on the history of cholera in the Black Country, which is available on Amazon. It's caused by the cholera vibri. Now, at the time, however, they didn't understand what caused cholera or how it could. So, how did they perceive the cause of cholera? Well, at that time, people still believed that illness resulted from an imbalance of humours. Bear in mind we didn't have germ theory until the 1850s. So we were all made up of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. If your humours were equal, you were healthy. If you had too much of a particular humour or not enough, you are unhealthy because you are in a state of dis-ease. And if we put dis and ease together, we get disease. This had been originated by the ancient Greeks and been the dominant medical theory well into the 19th century. I often say that it's fine for us to look back from our modern perspective and poo-poo such ideas, but we have to bear in mind that 1,000 years from now, what we believe to be medically accurate may be being laughed at by authorities of that time. So, one of the things they believed caused the imbalance of the humours was miasma, or bad air. It should also be noted that Florence Nightingale never accepted the germs as a cause of illness into old age. She believed that disease was caused by miasma, bad air. So when she was treating patients, everything had to be clean, windows open, to prevent any nasty, horrible miasma or bad air. But in 1832 and later in 1849, this theory of miasma or bad air has been built upon. So we have three different perspectives as to the cause of cholera. We have the contagionists. They believe that cholera could be spread, or caused by poor diet, drink, the weather, the seasons, and that the imbalance could be spread by touch, somebody's infected skin or their belongings. But you also had the anti-contagionists. So this disease mist arising from the breath of 2 millions of people from open sewers and cesspools, graves and slaughterhouses is continually kept up and undergoing changes. In one season it was pervaded by cholera. But many physicians and authorities took a middle of the road position. They were known as contingent contagionists, and they believed that a polluted air would lead to the generation of cholera within the vulnerable due to the diet or their temperament, which their temperament is which humour was dominant in that person. So babies tended to have a lot of blood, teenagers, yellow bile, middle-aged, you had a lot of phlegm, and older people a lot of black bile. It's interesting to note, we might poo-poo this idea of the humours, but we actually still make reference to them. Anybody who uses the phrase feed a cold and starve a fever is making a reference to humoral beliefs. It was believed that if you had a cold which was caused by too much phlegm, and phlegm tends to be cold and wet, if you ate a lot of food, it was like putting coal in a furnace. So the body would heat up and it would dry up the phlegm. If you had a fever, it was believed to be caused by too much yellow bile, which has the characteristics of being hot and dry. So if you've got a fever and you eat, you're going to be increasing the heat of the body. So it was believed you needed to starve the body and cool the body down. It actually originated in the 16th century, but it's one of those things that has carried on till today. Right, back to the main story. Cholera has some particularly nasty symptoms. It's spread by water or coming into contact with infected feces. So you end up with what's known as rice water diarrhea. This is diarrhea which is a grey colour, hence the name. And this is going on for well over an hour. Sometimes 2 hours. You get horrible cramps in the legs, causing the sufferer to roll the bed or the floor in absolute agony. They vomit a clear liquid, and that's going to go on for some time. So what happens is you're becoming dehydrated, resulting in a terrible thirst. The productions of urine ceases. The eyes become sunken into the head. The skin wrinkles. You may look young, 12, 13, 14. You would look old. The blood thickens, depriving the organs of oxygen. It cannot carry oxygen. So the skin becomes blue. It's known as cyanosis. The vox cholerica develops. Your vocal cords are completely dehydrated. Your voice becomes a harsh whisper. And death really did occur within a few hours. You could get up of a morning, you could feel perfectly well. You could be dead by the afternoon. It hasn't gone away, I should add. Recently I was giving a talk to some school children. One of the students was from Nigeria. He was 12 years old. When he was in Nigeria, when he was 8, he'd actually had cholera. He described it as the most painful experience he'd ever had in his short life. Till recently there was a massive outbreak of cholera in Sudan. So it hasn't gone away at all. It's still endemic in many parts of the world. Now, one of the symptoms is a terrible thirst. Now, you can't relieve this by drinking. You see, the cholera vibrae, or Vibrio cholera, is very, very cunning. The reason the diarrhea becomes grey is because it is caused by the shedding of the cellular lining of the digestive system, hence the grey colour. But what this also produces is it stops you getting rehydrated by drinking because the water cannot be absorbed. So today it's one of the easiest conditions to treat, just by saline rehydration straight into the blood vessels. But at that time they didn't have the knowledge or the technology to do that. But still a fascinating disease to those of us who study it. Now, in 1849, the conditions in the Black Country were disgusting, to put it mildly. So, still sanitary, overcrowded, having to share lavatories. So, people overcrowded. It really did facilitate its spread. Now, in 1849, after a few weeks, Stourbridge had suffered 314 fatalities. Nearly half the children under 15 years of age had died. The worst hit area was Lie Waste. Dr. Norris recorded. In a populous village in one parish, the Lie Waste, where many of the cottages are built with clay on a soft clay foundation and have generally only one low sleeping apartment 4 yards square, 6 or 8 often sleeping in the same room, and most frequently without a back door or window, with very little drainage. The disease made fearful ravages. In a circuit of about 400 yards containing 800 or 900 inhabitants, perhaps the mortality in the worst part of the village is greater than in most other spots in England. Filth, uncleanly habits, want of drainage, no sewerage, and a constant decomposition of animal and vegetable matter, and the air rendered still more noxious by numbers sleeping in the same apartment. Dr. Norris believed the seeds of cholera proceeded from foul air and filth more than from poverty and destitution. So we see he knows about the foul air, but he also recognises the filth produces the cholera. So he's obviously in the middle of the belief system. So there on the right we've got a picture of one of the clay houses from Lie Waste. Now, he also believed a causal factor was the imbibing of cider and apples. Again, we've seen that a contributing factor could be what you ate or drunk. He records, from this village, Lie Waste, many hundreds of women and children go into Herefordshire hop picking and return home, each loaded with apples, and the children eat voraciously of the fruit for many weeks. The hop pickers that went from the Lie Waste district last autumn were principally women and children, and they were allowed great quantities of cider. A few weeks after their return, many fell victims to the disease. So in these cases, cider and fruit appear to be a predisposing cause of cholera. Half the deaths occurred in children of various ages. Well, the conditions hop pickers lived in were particularly disgusting. So it's no surprise that cholera came back with them. But we're going to return to this. You see, in 1848, Dr. William Francis Saltow of Plymouth had reported upon an outbreak of cholera. A milkman's wife had died from cholera. Within 24 hours, between 30 and 40 of his customers had become sick with cholera. It was discovered the milk he was selling had been stored in an open pan in a room beneath the one where his wife had died. The floor of the room was rotten, and the victim's discharge of diarrhea and vomit had dripped down and contaminated the milk. Now, based upon this, Dr. Norris concluded that cholera could be transmitted through liquids, and he wrote a report detailing his conclusions for the members of the General Board of Health in London, who were responsible for the implementation of the Public Health Act 1848, which aimed to improve the sanitary conditions of towns and cities. Now, in 1849, the English physician Dr. John Snow had published his essay on the mode of communication of cholera. In it, he refuted the commonly held belief that cholera was a disease transmitted through miasma, or poisoned air, postulating that it was a disease spread by water. He had come to this conclusion by mapping out the incidences of cholera around an infected pump in Soho, London. Dr. Thomas Hunt, in 1850, in the Provisional Medical and Surgical Journal, observed, "The most curiously interesting point is that without being at all aware that Dr. Snow had published a pamphlet on the cholera, and without ever having heard of the original, and to say the very least of it, plausible theory of that most esteemed author, Dr. Norris adopts to a great extent the same views and reveals a history which, if the facts can be substantiated, throws the greatest credit on the theory of the propagation of cholera era by the introduction of choleric discharges of one person into the stomach of another." At this point in time, neither Dr. Norris or Dr. Snow knew of the cause of cholera, the pathogen, the Vibrio, which caused it. The microbiologists Filippo Pacini and Robert Koch identified the Vibrio, the bacterium responsible, in the second half of the 19th century. Now, the discoveries by Dr. Norris and Dr. Snow can be considered an excellent example of multiple discovery. It should also be noted that it was not until the 1854 cholera outbreak that Dr. Snow identified that those who drank only beer did not become infected with cholera. Again, he wasn't aware of the Vibrio. You see, in the manufacture of beer, water has to be boiled. That destroys the Vibrio. Now, cider is fermented, leaving the Vibrio unaffected. This was something Dr. Snow had already identified. So, i.e., that people who drink cider are more likely to become ill. Again, they're both on the same track. Now, we could say that Dr. Norris had been pipped to the post by Dr. Snow. But in 1857, Dr. Norris published his 8 cases of melanosis. This was a major work. Now, his findings included proposing a relationship between melanoma and environmental factors such as industrial pollution. He also observed that most of his patients who suffered from this had pale complexions and light-coloured hair, and that melanoma could spread to other organs. To control the recurrence, he advocated cutting out the tumour and the surrounding unaffected skin and flesh to prevent a regrowth of the melanoma. All these findings have been accepted by the medical profession today, and cutting out the tumour and the surrounding unaffected skin is still carried out today. This is quite a brilliant discovery. On March 23rd, 1877, Dr. Norris died. He had hemiplegia and apoplexy, i.e. a stroke, at his home in Stourbridge. He had served the people of Stourbridge for 60 years. He was buried at St Mary's Church in Old Springford. It could be argued Dr. William Norris never became as famous as Dr. John Snow. And to be honest, he has been forgotten in Stourbridge, the Black Country and the West Midlands. In fact, in his lifetime, he felt that his discoveries were being overlooked by the medical establishment. Understandable if you think about what happened with the cholera. Yet today, textbooks and studies on melanoma and its history still pay tribute to his work. As Maya Angelou said, if you are going to live, leave behind a legacy, make an impact on the world that can never be erased. And Dr. William Norris did that. So that's not a bad legacy at all, is it? Thank you for listening. If anyone's interested in any of my other works or writings or the documentaries that I've appeared in, then please go to my website, which is www.timetravelingmedicineman.co.uk. Thank you very much.